Doctors of Reddit. What are the dead giveaway signs that someone is faking? Brief note for all the student doctors out there. People can pass stroke field tests and having a stroke. I could do everything on the list while I had a clot in my brain verified by CT and MRI. Except I couldn't stop vomiting. Good times. Be aware sometimes sleep doesn't look like you think it should. My husband had the same when he had his stroke. Though he also had extreme vertigo. Took a CT to confirm his stroke. I'm a nurse on a floor that deals with a lot of chronic and acute pain patients. Most recent instance was this lady from a few weeks ago that was apparently splitting the oxycodone we were giving her in half in her mouth, and then when the nurses' backs were turned, she would stuff it in a pill jar. A night nurse caught her in the act and all of her sleep had to be searched. We found 20 half tablets of oxycodone she had been stashing. She told us that she was saving them for her family in case they need them because it's just so hard to get an oxycodone prescription these days. I had her a few days after that. And she was having some abdominal pain. Stat X-ray showed only gas. She just really needed to fart. But she was screaming. Claiming it was a 10. And making a huge beeping scene. She demanded dilaudid through her 4. And she wanted it to be pushed fast. Huge red flag right there. She wanted the high. Not the relief. Doc straight up said he wouldn't give her dilaudid because she was already on so many opiates. She then demanded lorazepam. Still through her 4, of course. Doc was like, fine, whatever. Just one time and only a low-end dose. I was flushing her 4 with normal saline first to make sure her 4 was patent, and she leans back and is like, oh, that's so much better already. Hadn't even given her the lorazepam yet. SMDH. For real though, gas pain is no joke. I was once rushed to the hospital. Car, as I knew I couldn't afford an ambulance. Because I was doubled over in pain, crying. I thought that something had ruptured or exploded. They weren't busy at all this night and got me back within 15 minutes of showing up. I don't like pills. Never have, because I know I had an addictive nature when it comes to substances, so I just avoid them altogether. So they do their test and scans and the doc comes in and tells me it's just severe gas buildup. I'm in tears still and ask the doc how the hell can gas cause this much pain and that it's gotta be something else. Doc says let me give you something and if that doesn't work we can try something else. I'm like, okay cool, because no way gas hurts this much. 30 minutes later I'm in the bathroom like I just spent an hour at Taco Bell. The doc comes in to check on me when I finally manage a free moment. I can't help but look dumbfounded. Since they weren't busy at all, he sat down and explained that since I have IBS I need to be more careful with my intake or else this could happen again. All the while I felt like a complete dumbass because gas had me in tears. I thanked the doc. He gave me some gas relief pills and suggested some diarrhea meds in case it happens again. I've never in my life been so sure it wasn't something only to be proven wrong. Obligatory, not a doctor. But I got a call from my son's school nurse when he was in 2nd grade. And the conversation went like this. Nurse, sounding upbeat and cheerful, says, "Your son wants to tell you his terrible news." Son gets on the phone. Says, "Hi mom. I cut my finger off." I ask him, "Where is your finger now?" "Son, I put it back on." I said, "Can I talk to the nurse?" Nurse gets on the phone again. Says, "Sounds serious. Right?" I asked, "Does he have a substitute teacher today?" Yes. I told the nurse to let him know I will take him to the hospital for a shot for his finger. To which he says, "I think it's okay." I glued it on really good. Nurse kept him in the office for a bit to talk about scary changes in the classroom. Did he make a full recovery? He has to reapply the glue occasionally. But otherwise he's fine now. Yeah. That's actually rather common when the patient opts to not go to the hospital for the reattachment shot. I went to emergency once with intense chest pain. The young new doctor I saw first listened to my chest and immediately concluded I had pericarditis, but the supervising doctor decided I was faking it for drugs for some reason. The next morning I woke up to a psychologist in my room asking all sorts of random speep when an orderly interrupted because the ultrasound guy was in and wanted to see me first thing I think after talking to the first doc I saw. Turns out I had pericarditis and myocarditis, and the dude wheeled me out himself and told them order an ambulance to take me to a hospital with a cardiac clinic. My hubs had pericarditis. That pain is no joke. Doc said he had it in med school and was the worst pain of his life. 15 hours. 8K debt, and they prescribed him ibuprofen 800. He has chronic stomach ulcers which he disclosed, but they insisted that was all they could do. So, pain from the pericarditis or pain from ulcers? You choose. Undefined. I don't know why anyone would want to fake anything medical. Unconsciousness in particular. I got a compound fracture recently and called 911 on myself and was put on hold. Fun stuff. But got through and asked them to send help. Operator was a badass and kept asking me questions to keep me conscious. The ambulance folks arrive. Casually got out of the ambulance. Walk up to me and then saw the bone sticking out of my body. And said, quote, "Oh, you're actually hurt?" Yes. Did you think I called 911 because I spilled some lemonade? Then it occurred to me that most of their calls must be horse's peep. But to cause me even more confusion, I received close to a $2,000 bill for the privilege of actual help and the ride to the hospital. That ludicrous bill is no fault of the EMS. I'm very much appreciative of their existence and they don't get nearly enough credit, but the best part of receiving that bill? The ambulance ride was roughly $1,850. The fentanyl they gave me was $2.15. The US health system terrifies me more than any illness. I can't imagine wondering considering the costs if I was injured or seriously ill. My sister is a pediatric audiologist and this is my favorite story of hers. Apparently, sometime in elementary school, usually the early grades, a ton of kids like to fake hearing loss. Like not just I can't hear the teacher. Full on. Want to get hearing aids. Etc. Anyway, she explained to me that based on the way she plays the tones, you can usually tell if someone is faking. Especially when they just pretend they can't hear anything. But it's not 100%. Obviously. Because hearing loss patterns can be really weird. However, she's caught a number of kids simply by saying, "Okay. So I'm going to play a random number of tones and they'll go in both ears. I want you to say yes if you hear it and no if you don't." However, she's caught a number of kids simply by saying, "Okay. So I'm going to play a random number of tones and they'll go in both ears. I want you to say yes if you hear it and no if you don't." I mean, if I was told that, I would definitely have answered no if, say, I only heard the tones in one ear. Faking a hearing loss in one ear is common in children to explain why they do poorly at school, but can still follow conversation okay. Fortunately, we audiologists have our ways of telling if someone is faking a hearing loss, but particularly in one ear. Essentially the bone conductor, one way of delivering tones, and part of a standard hearing test sits behind one ear. And most people assume that you hear the tone in the same ear. In reality, it vibrates the skull and is heard in whichever ear is the better ear. So basically, if you play a tone through a bone conductor placed on the right side, if that ear is deaf, you hear it in the left ear. So if someone tells you they hear tones only when the bone conductor is placed on one side, they're lying liars. I don't feel too bad sharing this secret here, because we have several other ways of picking out fakers too. My little brother actually is deaf on one ear, though we figured that out when he was still a baby. It normally doesn't impact him too much, but he really does have a hard time hearing the teacher and has to have a speaker put near him connected to a mic on the teacher, I think. I'm not 100% certain that's how it works. Anyways, apparently a couple other students, upon him explaining why the device was there and why he got preferential seating, announced that they, too, were deaf in one ear. My brother was young and naive. He was in 3rd grade, I think, and came home to excitedly tell us that apparently there were other kids in his class with the exact same problem. One time I was in hospital with decompression sickness and neurological damage and I couldn't piss. I told a nurse I needed a catheter, which she did right away. And I filled 3-liter bags straight off. Anyway, she commented that if a man actually says he needs a long tube pushed up the hole in his penis, then you can be sure he needs it done. As a nurse, I have never received more gratitude from patients than when I catheterize then and 2 to 3 liters comes out. This makes me think about that people once died because they couldn't take a piss. The inverse of this question: what can someone do if they are not faking it but for whatever reason they have multiple DRS insist they're faking it? But by never telling the patient they're faking it, nothing is ever resolved and it drags on for months and months. Find a different hospital. Don't transfer your medical history from previous doctors. Clean slate. I found an amazing endometriosis doctor recommended on Reddit. My primary care docs recommended my current OB/GYN after my original ignored me, saying I had vaginal bleeding for over a month and was in such extreme pain I could barely get out of bed. Within 5 minutes of talking to my new doc, he told me he thought I might have endometriosis and we booked the surgery. Turned out I gave a pretty severe case of it and PCOS, with my left ovary being the same size as my uterus and was at risk of bursting. So glad I finally had a doc take me seriously after a decade. Whenever the symptoms aren't there when the patient doesn't know they're being watched. I had someone fake a stroke recently and walked in on her walking around her room independently after pretending to be limp on her left side, letting us take complete care of her and wiping her butt for her. It was wild. Y'all. Why would anyone fake any of this stuff? But especially a stroke? What is the point? Undefined. Munchausen syndrome/factitious disorder. Attention/sympathy seekers. Loneliness. Homelessness/warm bed. Get out of jail/school work/malingering. Insurance fraud/welfare fraud. Disability money. Don't want to work. Narcissistic personality disorder. Get drugs. Amplified musculoskeletal pain syndrome. General mental illness. Caregiver fetish. Hypochondria. And one user said, women will do anything to get out of working. Dude, she didn't have to wipe her butt anymore. Totally worth it? /S. Born to speep. No longer forced to wipe. That's a quote for the bathroom walls. I'm gonna put that up, thank you. My favorite thing about this thread is that half of the "here's how you know they're faking" comments get responses that are all "yeah" about me. Tell you how that assumption beeped me over and I almost died. Happens all the time. I am in the middle of being treated like I'm faking and it's really frustrating. I had a tool slip at work and hit me in the eye and forehead. Knocked me out for a second and I lost sight in my eye. An hour later I started getting my sight back. But it hasn't fully come back. It's been months now. 2 things I got diagnosed with were ocular migraines. and vitreous detachment, and a concussion. But none of those things explain why my vision is still blurry in my right eye. Except the VD, which causes floaters. But my issue is blurry vision. Like I have Vaseline in my eye. But doctors keep telling me I'm fine. That I need to go back to work. One doctor told me to think about the economy and that I was lucky to have a job right now, so I quit my job. I still want to see out of my right eye, but none of the doctors are taking me seriously. When I had a stroke 10 months ago, my biggest fear was I was somehow faking it and the ambulance ride was a sham, and why was I doing it? No, it turns out I was having a stroke. I was so worried I was being a faker, although I have never done that before. Just a really odd mental state. This was me while going and in the ER for anaphylaxis. I genuinely thought I was there for no good reason. And that I was fine. Despite my entire face being swollen and not being able to catch my breath. I kept apologizing to the nurses for wasting their time once I could breathe again. I have the reverse. My back went out, extreme sciatica pain. Like being struck by lightning constantly. Couldn't move for days. When someone found me 3 days later, they called 911. Just for the doctor to tell me I was faking it for pain meds. While I was crying in pain, I asked him why I'd lay in a pile of my own piss and speep for 3 days for some Vicodin when I literally own a bar. Beeping insane. Undefined. If someone is truly unconscious, their thumb always wiggle. Just say that out loud to yourself. Moms. I always know when you're lying because your ears turn red when you lie. Kids. Cover their ears when they lie. I told my daughter that she gets a red spot on her forehead when she lies. So she started using her hand to cover her forehead when she lied. It's like how you can make anyone blush by claiming that they're blushing. The more they deny it, the harder they'll blush. I've had people ask why I'm blushing before when I wasn't. I never know what to tell them. That's just my beeped up face, like what do you want from me? Once my doctor accused me of faking to get out of school. I went in with serious stomach issues. And for some reason he decided to tickle me. Which instinctually made me fidget and smile. To him that meant I was faking it, and he sent me away without checking my actual problem. I was grounded, and 15 years later, I still have those stomach issues. Beep you, Dr. Goody. Not a doctor but a paramedic. Tons of calls to the jail for inmates with seizures. I lift the arm over their face and let it go. They'll move it to prevent hitting their face, or I'll lightly brush their eyelashes and they'll twitch to it. That's genius. I have had a few seizures, and the injuries I've had from falling and thrashing are pretty legit. It would take a hell of a lot of dedication to fake those. My wife is a doctor, and she had dealt with people faking things like one of their legs simply not working. The trick is to tell them to do some other thing with a positive phrasing, making it seem like doing so will prove the patient's story is true, while it proves the opposite. This works for both people who are actively faking it and people who have subconsciously convinced themselves the problem is real. For example, if they say their right leg can't move, you first ask them to try lifting it, which they try and obviously fail to move or flex any muscles in it. Then you act intrigued and say something like, now your left leg is the one that works fine, right? Go ahead and lift it up for me for comparison. While they are doing this, you still casually have your hand on their right leg, which you had placed there when you were feeling for any activity when they tried to lift it. Now when the person is laying there and lifts their left leg to prove their right one doesn't work, they will naturally flex their right leg to provide balance with their left leg in the air. If they are able to flex their right leg then but won't even flex it when they claim to be trying to move it, then you know their leg still works. You just have to narrow down if they realize are faking it intentionally. Anyone else sitting in the dark lifting their left leg with a hand on the right, Trying to convince the imaginary doctor that their right leg don't work? A nurse thought I was faking that I could not swallow when I woke up from jaw surgery. When I came out of the surgery and was panicking telling them I couldn't swallow my own saliva, the nurse just told me, yes, you can. This surgery wouldn't have anything to do with your ability to swallow. I could also barely speak and started crying and pleading with her to believe me. I ended up having cranial nerve damage that paralyzed half of my tongue, trachea, esophagus, and vocal cords. It took 8 months to heal. I drank thickened water, which is as gross as it sounds, for 8 months. Having a healthcare professional not believe you during trauma is absolutely scarring. Undefined. Second undefined. 1. Surgeon did believe me, and the conclusion they ended up coming up for the cause was that my nerves must have shut off protectively due to the pressure of the laryngoscope during intubation. 2. We did see a lawyer, but they said it's very hard to pursue legal action in malpractice cases because it's very hard to prove. But regardless, if I recovered, which I did, there is no case. 3. Yes. I realize this doesn't answer the ops question. Just saying that maybe health professionals should be careful when trying to discern if someone is faking it. If they're not, it can be extremely traumatic. 4. Surgery was for an ossifying fibroma, a benign bone tumor in my lower jaw. Had 4 teeth removed and a portion of my jawbone. 5. Thickened water is water with a thickening agent added, usually xanthan gum. When you have damage to those throat muscles, thin liquids are actually the hardest to swallow. I think mostly due to muscle reaction time. My go-to was thick and easy nectar thickness lemon water. I just want to point out that there are many types of seizures and there's a bit of a stigma surrounding people having them. Some people have focal aware seizures and will be able to respond and control their limbs during the episode. It's dangerous to assume that someone is faking just because they aren't experiencing a seizure, like how you expect seizures to look. You can be faking good too. Had a tooth kicked out. Mouth filled with blood and swelling. I'd stuck a tissue in to try to stop the blood. I presented to the triage at the dental hospital. I'm dribbling blood as I talk. She asks me if it hurts and I said a little bit. She looked at me dead in the eye and said, one of the many things we triage on is pain. Gotcha. Good nurse. Hurts like a mother peeper. I've literally been kicked in the face. Thanks for that. Notes taken. Was patched up and out of there within an hour. Undefined. I'm reading through this and hoping my doctor doesn't think I'm crazy. I've been recovering from long haul COVID and it makes it seem like I want meds, but in reality, I just want answers.